the studies that I pointed out that said chronic use of aspirin increases your risk of cancer, damages your stomach, damages your liver, your kidneys. Do you remember what the #1 cause of liver damage in the country is? Chronic use of Advil or ibuprofen. Okay? So, if you have migraine headaches, start considering avoiding the pesticides instead of reaching for the medicine cabinet. Much more natural approach, and it gets to the source. Because what's an aspirin going to do? Is it going to take care of the problem? No. Is it going to get rid of the pesticide in you? No. It's going to do one thing: mask the symptom, right? So you might feel better. Hopefully you feel better. It's not going to take care of the problem. It's not going to make you any healthier. Actually, you're going to see in a second, it adds to the toxic load, because medications are drugs and our body has to detoxify them. So it adds to your toxic load when you take those medications. So maybe you came tonight thinking, oh, I'm just going to go learn, how to minimize toxins or avoid toxins. Hopefully you realize after this slide that this is some serious stuff we're talking about. It's not just a matter of getting rid of toxins. It's a matter of not developing some of these serious diseases that Americans are facing today. Pretty serious stuff. Not hard to fix, just have to know what to do and what to do and how to do it, but pretty serious stuff. So the tough thing about pesticides, if you become a good label reader, which we've worked on in here in past talks, how to read labels and what to look for, if you become a good label reader, you can start to learn how to eat better food. Okay? However, you're not going to find pesticides on the label. You're never going to go and see that, oh, this apple was sprayed with DEET, or whatever. Okay? It doesn't say that. And so it's not on your label, and it's very difficult to know, which is why it's so important to just buy organic. USDA certified organic gives you your best shot for minimizing your exposure to these things. The nice thing is there is a group called the Environmental Working Group that puts out a list of what's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So the Clean 15 is a list of the 15 cleanest fruits and vegetables that are the least toxic. The Dirty Dozen, is a list of the 12 fruits and vegetables that are the most toxic. Okay? So, even though it's best to buy all organic, if you can't buy all organic, these lists at least give you an idea of which ones are the most important to be buying organic. You can find that list. You can go to foodnews.org. You can find that list there. The list is also in the Maximize Living Nutrition Plan book. You can find it in there for those of you that have that. So we've talked about frankenfood. We talked about pesticides. Let's talk about food dyes here for a second. Food dyes, this is what makes the... hello, welcome. Food dyes is what makes those fun colors in all of our foods. The foods that are fun for our kids to eat because they're all the different colors of the rainbow, Fruity Pebbles, all those colors, whatever it is. Sounds like fun until you realize that these things are linked to cancer and tumors, thyroid problems, allergic reactions, and hyperactivity. It's sad how many children in this country are being diagnosed with hyperactivity and ADHD or ADD, and they're being put on a drug called Ritalin, when majority of them don't get enough exercise. They're eating all kinds of food dyes in their Fruity Pebbles and other fruity colored foods that leads to hyperactivity. So it doesn't make any sense to give them a drug, Ritalin, when all you really need to do is fix the cause. Get them exercise daily, remove their food dyes. Okay? Now there's some other things that are leading to hyperactivity too, things like MSG, which we'll talk about in a second, too much sugar. So it's not just food dyes, but food dyes is part of it, most definitely. So here's an article that talks about food dyes. This came out on CBS News, and I know you can't read it. I don't intend for you to be able to read it. Again, if you want a copy, I can produce that for you. But you don't really have to be able to read it. I've read it for you, and I can tell you that the title says it all. The title says, Food Dyes are linked to allergies, ADHD, and cancer, and a group calls for the United States to outlaw their use. Sadly, the use has not been outlawed yet. And it probably won't be. Again, it goes back to money. There's a lot of money involved in things, We talked about how much money Oscar Mayer makes from selling Lunchables. I'm sure that Fruity Pebbles makes somebody a lot of money too. And I'm not picking on just Fruity Pebbles. It's all the things that have the food dyes in them. But the people most at risk are the children. Okay, the younger you are, the more susceptible you are to this stuff. Doesn't mean it doesn't affect us as adults too, because it does. But there's 15 million pounds of 8 different synthetic dyes that are poured into the food supply every year. Okay, 15 million pounds of 8 different dyes, and they're linked to these things: allergies, autism, ADHD, cancer. So let's talk about some other additives in the foods. We've covered our frankenfoods, we've covered pesticides, food dyes. Let's look at some specific additives in some of our foods that are dangerous. First one I want to talk about, nitrites. A nitrite is a chemical substance that's added to packaged meats for the purpose of making it look fresh. It gives it a reddish tint, makes it look fresh, so it's eye appealing to the consumer, so it sells more. You know, again, it goes back to making money in marketing. The problem is, nitrites are very dangerous. They've actually been banned in many countries. They've almost been banned in the United States. The World Cancer Research Fund back in 2009 concluded that packaged meats are too dangerous for human consumption. And a study at the University of Hawaii says that eating nitrites in packaged meats increases your risk of pancreatic cancer by 67%. So again, let's look at what we're currently doing in this country. If somebody has pancreatic cancer, what's the typical route they'll go through? They'll go to their doctor, they'll get referred to the oncologist, and what will they be on? Chemotherapy, radiation, maybe surgery, right? Which isn't working, because if anybody in here thinks that cancer rates are going down or dropping, you're wrong. They're going up. They keep going up every year. So that stuff clearly is not working. What needs to be done is remove the source, right? If you're getting pancreatic cancer because you're eating too many hot dogs, you need to get rid of the hot dogs, not add more chemotherapy and more drugs. Hopefully that makes sense. Here's another additive, MSG. I mentioned it just a second ago. I said we'd talk more about it. So MSG, you've probably heard of it. It's become fairly popular over the last several years in a bad way. Popular because people are realizing how bad it is. It's a toxin. It's called monosodium glutamate. That's one I can actually pronounce, so I say it. A little history on MSG. It was discovered in 1908. 40 years later, it was introduced in the United States, and it quickly became a large money-making industry because it enhances flavor of food. It makes things taste better, so people want more of it and buy more of it. You know, again, it goes back to money. 20 years after that, we discovered that it was toxic. It causes damage to the neurons in your brain and the nerve cells in the retina in your eye. Okay? So that same year, it was voluntarily withdrawn from baby foods, or so they said. What they actually did is just change the name of it. They said, oh, this is bad, we don't want to get a bad rap for having this in our food. So they hid it under some different names, and they didn't actually remove it from the baby food for a whole decade. Okay? I want to give you a clue about some hidden sources of MSG, because when you look in the food label, you should be able to find this, but the tricky thing is sometimes it's not always labeled as MSG. So here's some other names, some aliases that it can be hiding under. Hydrolyzed vegetable protein, textured protein, whey protein extract, enzymes, yeast extract, autolyzed yeast. The list goes on, right? I don't need to sit here and read it to you. If you want a copy, I'll get it to you, or you can write it down. Frustrating though, isn't it? I mean, it's like we're being tricked. And basically that's what it amounts to, because again, you have companies that are making a product and their number one goal is to make a profit from that. You're going to eat more of it if it tastes good. They make it taste good with MSG, but now that you know that MSG is bad, they don't want MSG in the label. So yeah, they basically trick you, is what it amounts to. It sounds bad, but that's what it is. They use a different name, still MSG. Still has the same toxic effects because it's MSG. So MSG, some common foods that it's found in. You know, I'll always tell you that the general rule is, if you're trying to decide whether or not a food is good for you or not, ask yourself, could I find this occurring naturally in nature? I want to eat an apple. Could I go find an apple tree and pick an apple? Most definitely. That's a better food choice. Am I ever going to be able to go find a potato chip or a package of soup occurring naturally? No, right? It's a packaged processed food, not a good food for us. Well, guess what? The foods that MSG is commonly found in are just that, those packaged processed foods. Soup, soup mixes, salad dressings, chips, frozen entrees, restaurant foods, commercial whey protein. Here's an important one, commercial whey protein. Because I'm always preaching in this office how important supplementing with a whey protein is. That one right there, I have samples for you to try. Why am I always preaching that? Because we know through research that whey protein is the #1 food that our bodies are most deficient in. You might think, how can our bodies be deficient in protein? We eat all kinds of protein in this country with meat and dairy, right? That's true. However, most all of it has been denatured or damaged because of the processes it goes through, the heating processes, and our body can't use it. So you consume a bunch of protein that's rendered useless by your body. Research has shown that the #1 nutrient that we're deficient in is protein. That's why a good whey protein supplement is so important for your health. Not just bodybuilders, all of us. We all need protein, all right? But the reason I tell you don't just go buy any protein is because of this. Commercial whey proteins, there's many problems with it, and I'm not going to get into all of it. If you want to know about it, ask me afterwards. But here's one of the problems. It has MSG in it. MSG is toxic. Why would I send you somewhere to get something that's toxic? I'll never do that to you. That's why I always tell you, make sure that it's what GMP rated. I talk about that, good manufacturing procedures like ours is. You don't have to buy it here, right? I don't care if you buy it here, but you need to be taking this stuff from somewhere. I give you a good source of it. If you can find it somewhere else, great. But make sure it meets the standards. If you want to ask me if it meets the standards, bring it into me. Ask me about it. Make sure it's MSG. Or, sorry, not MSG. GMP, not MSG. GMP. Okay, that's the best rule that you can use, along with some other tricks.
What does GMP stand for?
Good manufacturing procedures.
Oh.
Yep. There's other important things about your whey protein. You want to make sure it's coming from a good source, right? Because your protein, you're going to be as healthy as your protein is. Your protein is going to be as healthy as the cow that it came from, because that's where it comes from. If you're buying it from a sick cow that's not raised properly, you're going to be sick from it too. So it's important you're getting it from a good source. Getting into that a little bit more than I intended to, but I guess when I tell you something, I want to make sure you're getting the right thing. So you want to look for a protein that's coming from a cow that's been grass-fed, free to roam on the prairie, right? You don't want these things penned up, fed grain in feedlots, and we're going to get into that a little bit more as far as how this all plays together. Or comes together. But those are the things you want to look for in a good whey protein. Gravies, seasoned rices, pastas, meat tenderizers, seasonings. Again, these are the things commonly found, or the MSG is commonly found in. Here's another interesting one. MSG is commonly found in hospital liquid diets. What's up with that? I thought the hospitals were where you're supposed to go to get healthy, right? Well, as sad as this is, the hospital is not there for health care. It's there for sick care, okay? And what I mean by that is you don't go to the hospital to get healthy. You go there when you're sick, you have some signs and symptoms, and the hospital will give you drugs to do what? Mask those symptoms. What do the drugs do? They increase your toxic load, ultimately making you less healthy. You might feel better, but you're less healthy. And then they're feeding liquid diets with MSG in it. That's toxic. Ridiculous. Time they got on board. So let's talk a little bit about toxic bioaccumulation. And once you understand this concept, you'll understand why it's so important that your whey protein comes from a healthy dairy source, a healthy cow. You'll understand why it's so important to be buying your meat and dairy products organic if you're choosing to buy these things. Here's why. The rule of toxic bioaccumulation goes like this. First of all, there's an environmental release of toxins at a low concentration in plants and soils, okay? So that means if you dug up some soil or you tested a plant, there are low concentration levels of toxins occurring naturally in those. I don't know if I want to say the word naturally, because actually a lot of it comes from unnatural things like pollution of the water and air and soil.